Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. This is episode 85 with Alex Sterling. Alex is an engineer slash producer slash studio owner slash entrepreneur based in New York City. He's the founder of Precision Sound Studios in Manhattan, one of the few studios in New York City with a large format SSL console. Since 2005, Alex has had a wide and varied career in audio, ranging from live sound, concert recording, studio construction, studio systems, design, and acoustic consulting, post-production for film and television, all the way to major label artist recording, mixing, and mastering. Alex is an example of a modern engineer whose work has taken him widely across genres and across the broad industry of music and sound. At present, Alex balances his time between working with clients of Precision Sound and new ventures in audio product development. Alex and I actually connected on Instagram after I released the episode with Sam Sherbin, and I invited him on the show. Alex and I just started chatting, and it just became the episode. It was already a flowing conversation, so I just went with it, and that's why you're hearing the whole intro bit now. But I really enjoyed my conversation with Alex. We talked about so many things, really got into a lot of it. And we talked about, his journey, building relationships, building studios, recording philharmonic orchestras, his approach to mixing and mastering. He has an exciting new business venture that we talked about. He talked about going to mix with the masters, with actual several masters. And you'll hear about that in the episode. So without further ado, let's just get into it. This is my conversation with Alex Sterling. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Yeah, wait, so you're on the Upper West Side?
Yeah, so I run a recording studio called Precision Sound, and it's in a residential building on the Upper West Side, and I'm in a commercial basement space right across from the Museum of Natural History.
Oh, wow, so cool. I want to ask you about that space with the bookshelves and the piano. It's like something else.
Yeah, and that the pictures that you saw on my website are actually, that whole space has been completely, about 3 years ago, was completely demolished, and I've been very much involved in a very time-consuming and involved full renovation of the studio, and so I'm actually now in the final wiring stage and about to, reopen the space to the public eventually.
So it's like what I saw is not what it's going to be like.
Yeah, that's how it was from basically 2015 until about 2018 or so. And then in the end of 2018, I closed the space, kind of went freelance and did more remote work, and then really focused on kind of getting the renovation going. And that's been Corona didn't help the time frame a little bit. And of course, construction is, when you're doing kind of full ground up construction of a studio, it's very time consuming, very involved.
Yeah. Cool. So maybe we could chat about that, like building a studio from scratch. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you're doing like room
definitely
within a room kind of stuff, but we could chat about like just like designing acoustics and stuff like that. Sounds like something you know about.
Yeah, I've had a kind of diverse background in audio. I was sort of one of these people that didn't find a natural place initially. Like a lot of people, they go to school, they study engineering, or they're musicians, and they kind of fall into doing production or engineering kind of soon after. And I began as a hobbyist. I was very interested in music production when I was in high school, and I was sort of one of the, I studied some instruments, but I was never really very good at them. I was too lazy to practice, to be honest. I mean, I wish that my mom had like forced me to learn piano like the proper way, but I was, rebellious kid, wanted to watch cartoons instead. But for some reason I had all this music floating around in my head. And when I was introduced to MIDI in a high school music class, I was just blown away and like fell in love and became addicted to programming beats in back then it was Reason 1.0 and Digital Performer and things like that. This was in the early 2000s. And so that kind of launched my interest and my passion for production. And then I went to IAR after I graduated high school, and that was sort of like a certificate program in music production and engineering. And that really kind of introduced me to the concept of audio as a career. But at that point, which was sort of the mid-2000s, it was right on the kind of heels of Napster and MP3s, and it was sort of the beginning of the collapse, or kind of right in the middle of the collapse of the old order. And so there were a lot of studios that were closing in New York, and I was trying to get jobs, trying to find internships, couldn't really get anything. So I ended up working for one of my professors, and he did all kinds of stuff. He did concert recording, live sound, systems integration. I kind of became his kind of right hand. And so I got all this complicated sort of background, which was ultimately very beneficial for me, because when I finally did kind of find my place in a studio environment, I had all this other background to kind of bring into the studio, which was great for me because I could kind of hit the ground running.
So cool, man. So I take it we're like around the same age-ish. Like I graduated high school in 2005, so I figured like maybe we're in the same.
2004 was when I graduated, yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're about the same time. Yeah, it's like a rough time to enter the industry, I feel like.
Yeah. Now, where did you said you grew up in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to Queens College, and then I moved to Israel like right after that.
Oh, okay.
I've been here for 11 years, actually.
Oh, wow. Have you been able to come back at all?
Yeah. My sister and her husband live in Manhattan, actually. And my parents kind of split time between Israel and Brooklyn. Well, like only recently. They moved to Israel actually in the pandemic. They couldn't see their grandchildren.
Yeah.
So kind of like was an impetus. But yeah, I've been back lots of times. Now it's been a while. This has been like the longest it's been since I guess September was a year since I was in the States. So it'll be almost a year and a half or something.
Yeah. Gosh, the time has just gone. It's hard to imagine it's really been a whole year since this thing, became serious. I think a lot about how humanity normalizes things that when you imagine them, they seem unbelievable, and then you get used to it and you sort of adapt to it, and you find new ways of existing, within these confines and constraints. Obviously, some people are better suited to that than others, but it's a challenge.
It's crazy. I feel like, I don't know, I was talking to a friend of mine. He's like telling me like, don't expect things to go back to normal. Like it's like we're evolving. Like it's never going to be the way it was before this happened.
Yes.
Like you got to just like, it's like, I don't know practically what that changes for me, but it's like, okay, I'm not like just trying to get back to what it was. Like I need to like think about whatever the future is going to be, which is going to be different,
Absolutely. I mean, that has been something that's been on my mind a lot in recent months as my studio becomes closer to being done and kind of ready to open up again to the public. It's like great time to be working in a enclosed, confined environment with other people, right? Like, sort of how to think about running a recording studio in this circumstance is something I'm really working on. And obviously audio has a lot of remote potential, right? We all do remote work of some kind or another here or there. But as a studio owner, where so much of my focus has been providing a creative space, a technical space that can provide functionality to people, that creates real challenges as a business. And so that's been something that's been on my mind is like, everyone get your vaccines,
Yeah. Man, I just hope that these new variants are not, not resistant to the vaccines. I'm actually in between my shots now because Israel's like vaccinating like crazy. We're like the guinea pig for the world. So that's how we got so many vaccines so fast. My wife is like officially immune, I think, because she got her second shot a week ago.
Oh, great.
She's an EMT, so she was able to get it like pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm like a week from my second shot.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on being one of the survivors.
Yeah. So far. Yeah. It's wild, man. I don't even know. Like, I don't have any good words. It's just, I hope the vaccines work, and I hope it's like a solution. I'm like nervous that like we're going to get all these vaccines and then it's just going to like, we're still going to have some shit to deal with. But on the other hand, who knows? Like, I feel like it might be like a daycare virus in like 5 years. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
The reason why I had this thought before I saw a paper publish something like this. And the reason why I thought about it is because, like, the Native Americans would like drop dead from the diseases that the Europeans brought over.
Yeah, smallpox, all that.
And like things that like weren't a big deal for Europeans, but like the Native Americans were just dropping dead. And like because this coronavirus is so novel, like that's the reason why people are dropping dead. But like if, kids get this in like, daycare or whatever, then it'll just be like another one of those diseases.
It's true. I mean, keeping your fingers crossed that the variants don't throw a wrench in the mix. But so tell me about your work in audio. So I saw that you are a mixer and you're hosting this podcast. And what's your sort of background and how did you get into it? Yeah,
well, my story is I made Aliyah. We call it. We moved to Israel at 22 for the first time in my life. I didn't have a band to play with. I was playing in bands in college and high school and stuff. I'm a bass player, and
nice.
all of a sudden I was like, I don't even know what to do with all these like creative energies. I need to do something. And so, I had a Mac. I started messing around with GarageBand. Then I bought, a Zoom microphone and Logic. And then, next thing you know, I'm like opening a studio like a couple years later. And I just haven't looked back really. I was playing weddings. I was doing like a lot of wedding gigs here in Israel.
Yeah.
So I co-founded a wedding band, and I was kind of doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And about, I guess 4 years ago, I said, forget it. Like if I want to do like audio long term, I need to like really like, I need to quit the managerial part of the band. And so I stepped back and had a rough year. And then things started slowly picking up again, and things were like really moving in a good direction before Corona hit. And now things have been like all over the place.
Yeah. Do you run a studio for in-person work? Was that kind of big a part of your business?
It's a home studio. It's not. I'm not like you. Like not like a big facility where it's like anyone could rent it out or whatever.
Gotcha.
It's more like if I'm producing your record or if I'm mixing your record or maybe I'm doing a voiceover or like a podcast work. I do like a bunch of like other things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, yeah, like, I don't know. Like I had a weekly podcast that I was recording in this room with like other people. And then eventually I was editing that podcast and eventually they didn't have budget to pay me. And that was it. You know what I mean? So
yes.
Yeah. And, I'd do vocal sessions, random like instrument sessions and stuff like that.
Gotcha. It sounds like the usual in audio,
yeah.
like the usual potpourri of audio work.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like I would love to niche down a bit more, but it's very hard when you're in a city like Jerusalem where, you know what I mean? Like you have to be in like LA, I feel like, or Nashville to really like niche down to be like just a mixer or just a producer or just whatever it is, mastering.
I think you're right about that because even in New York, like the industry, at least the American music industry, is really centered in LA. Like that's where all the label offices are kind of. That's like there are label offices in New York. Like they do work here too, but I always get the feeling that the decisions are not made here. Like they're made over there, and there's so much more density of songwriters and producers, and the publishing machine is really active there in a way that's different than here in New York. And New York has a lot more like commercial music production, for example, for film and TV. Like that's a big thing. Sync is a big thing here. A lot of post-production is done here. So as a studio owner, you really have to kind of stay nimble and kind of be able to accommodate all these different kinds of things. And it's too bad because sometimes that's not always the most interesting work, but there's the challenge of balancing passion and interest with then commerce and business.
Yeah, that does sound a lot like, I guess, what we're doing here. And it's interesting you said that because there was a guest on my show named Urko who is in LA, and he was telling me like, I was like, do you really need to go to LA to like make it to really make it in the business? He's like, no, but if you want to niche down, you have to go to a city like LA. Otherwise you're doing everything. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's the reason why. Yeah. And I actually spoke with a woman named Skylar Coco, who was recently on the show, and she told me like, yeah, that's why I moved to LA from New York. It's like, you really want to be in the heart of the business. You got to be like in LA. Yeah. Which is crazy. But that might change now though. I don't know, That's definitely,
it seems, if you think about like what are the long-term effects of the last year's situation, right? Obviously, there's macroeconomic impacts to all kinds of public-facing businesses, right? Whether it's hospitality or commercial real estate, office buildings, things like that, sports, entertainment, right? Like the list goes on. And that obviously, like it's like the year of Zoom, right? Like what we're doing right now, right? So, there's an idea of, are we going to sort of adapt to more and more separateness in creative arts and creative professions? And to some degree, we're kind of well suited to that in the sense that I've been emailing files across the world for more than 10 years now. It's like that's been part of how I operate my business is I serve the global industry, right? I have clients all over, whether they're in the studio or not, right? You can work with them, which is part of what's great about audio actually is that its music is like the ultimate universal language that totally transcends cultures and countries and nationality. Like it's everywhere and everyone speaks that language in some form or another kind of. So that's great. But again, there are certain things where the art of audio engineering really does require being in the room with that instrument and positioning that microphone and interacting with that player and having that kind of develop